Hello and welcome or welcome back to Read Becca for the Booktube Prize final round in nonfiction. I also read 3 out of 6 of the books in the previous round, in the semifinal, so I did vlog that experience. If you want to see the vlog footage of those 3 books, I will link you to the previous round vlog. So onward to the vlog. This vlog is off to a terrible start because I really forgot to record anything of my day today. And today is August 1st, is the beginning of the Booktube Prize finals round. So that is the project of this vlog. I'm judging in the nonfiction round again this round, so that also benefits me this round because it means I have read 3 out of my 6 books for this round. I'm not going to be rereading those. I do want to kind of try to get to my next 3 for this round as quickly as possible, so I don't have to kind of check back on those previously read books from the last round. So I've already watched my assignment, checked my email, all of that. I know exactly what I'm reading. I went to the library, I picked up one of my books. So the 3 books that I will be reading this round, the one that I picked up is My Name is George Floyd by Robert Samuels and Toulouse Olorunnipa. So this is book number 1 that I'm going to get to. The other 2 are The Immense World by Ed Yong, which I've seen everywhere. I have wanted to read. It's a very popular science nature text, and Ed Yong is wildly famous for previous books, so I expect it to be fantastic. So that's probably the one I'm going in with the highest expectations for. And the other one I keep blanking on. Multiple times through the day I've been like, I know there is another book. Cannot remember the name of the author or the book. But that book is The Escape Artist by Jonathan Friedland. And that one is about the Holocaust, I believe. So that one I have heard the least details of, other than people giving brief snippets, I think. I'm not sure how it has made it this far into the competition without me having a pretty good idea about it, but we will see. Maybe I will go in fresh and it will blow me away like some of my previous round picks. One of the fun things is that my previous round top pick is out. So that could bode well for the picks right below it, because my top 3 were really tight in the previous round, so either of those could really move up, or one of these 3 that I'm reading in this round could take the top spot easily. So we will see what the shakeup is with this round, but I'm really looking forward to getting into my reading and taking you all along with me. Rue decided his librarian skills were in need of some practice. Ripley and I are catching up on our TLS from a couple weeks ago, this lovely quiet Saturday morning. This particular one has a wonderful article from Claire Coda, the author of her debut novel Women Eating, which I enjoyed very much. It's definitely a debut. It has some things that are like sort of loose threads. But this was a really lovely article on Wandering Souls by Cecile Pin, which I believe was up for the Women's Prize, and I have not read it yet, but it sounds very interesting. And in particular, this really reminded me of what I loved about Coda's writing in her novel, where she draws from food and her heritage so strongly, and those shared elements with Cecile Pin from Vietnam. And all of that just made me so want to read more from Coda, even more so than Cecile Pin's book. So I am really looking forward to whatever she writes next, because this was just so well written. I've been slow getting started with Booktube Prize because I'm trying to focus on stuff I have due back at the library, but I have in fact started, at least. His Name is George Floyd, for my first Booktube Prize book, and it's good in terms of readability, definitely. I'm finding it flows very well from a story perspective, I would say. We kind of had a little jump around in timeline that I'm not sure I loved. I would have liked to kind of get immersed a little more before we jump back, because we get a very brief introduction that doesn't totally contextualize things for me. I kind of needed more context. And then we get the scene leading up to George Floyd's murder at the hands of police. So basically the police showing up is then where it jumps back into his childhood, and we get a little bit of context about his childhood. And then we jump even further back to his ancestry. So we're getting this very disjointed or broken timeline that I wish I had gotten a little bit more before we went into the history. So other than that, I am having a pretty major problem with this from a nonfiction standpoint. I kind of want to wait until I've read a little more to see if that's consistent or if it's just minor things here and there in the first part. So I will talk about that more definitely, but right now there are things jumping out at me that I really dislike how this is being framed in terms of delivering a work of nonfiction. So we shall see. It is 10:30 at night and we are going to a botanical garden. We're walking up now and the corpse flower has bloomed. So they have a special opening for free just to see the corpse flower. There are definitely a lot more people than I was anticipating at 10:30 at night, but they're open for a few hours, or they let people line up for a few hours. And I'm expecting it will take a little while, but everything is closed in the actual garden. However, they do have Chihuly glass sculptures throughout that should be lit, so we'll see some of those and hopefully see a weird flower that is very smelly. You guys won't get to enjoy the smell, but I will. And this is something that only blooms every year for like a day, so this is the chance to see it. I'm very excited. I haven't had a chance to see it before. I missed the first bloom. They have two corpse flowers here. First one was last week. Just shy of 2 hours waiting in line to see the corpse flower for about 30 seconds. It was cool. It is very massive. That does not come across very well in pictures or video, but it is really cool and imposing to see. It also does not smell as bad as they make it sound. Like, it was not that awful. They did have a lot of fans going in there and stuff, but yeah, there's definitely an unpleasant odor, but it's not overwhelming. It's not a real horrific stench like they make it sound like. So that was a cool kind of bucket list, I guess, rarity to experience, to get to see the corpse flower. And now it's time for bed. Drive home and then bed. Well, that is not great. So I tripped outside and things are looking pretty swollen. It doesn't feel terrible right now, at least yet. I can still put weight on it, so we will see how this feels later. I'm guessing not good. I slept with my leg up all night as best I could. They're looking much better today. A lot less scary. I'm feeling it a little bit more, but I think we are fine. I really am glad because I was not looking forward to a trip to urgent care. I am actually dead. Gumbo is fully 100% in my lap. She's getting affectionate to the point of biting. Biting and drooling, face rubbing. This is wild. Well, it's been a while for me, if not for you. I had to set His Name is George Floyd aside for a couple weeks to get done stuff from not Booktube Prize, stuff to be back at the library. And as a result, this really was read in dribs and drabs there for a while, and I'm back to it full bore. It's very easy reading, I would say. This is told very anecdotally in terms of the biography aspect, and then we jump into history about things that are connected and how US policies in his ancestry all the way up to today sort of led the momentum toward his life trajectory to this murder that happened. And I don't know if I love that sort of memoir anecdote aspects. Obviously, a memoir would be the person's anecdotes about their own life, but when we have a biography that's told almost entirely through anecdotes, I don't feel the references there are as transparent as I would like them to be. We're not getting a lot of clear definition of who specifically was talked to give us these anecdotes or how much they were corroborated. So I'm not sure about that. But it is very easy to read. It really flies along, so I'm just plowing through it now, I would say. And the historical aspects are very good, but they feel a little overview, I guess. There are things I know, like sharecropping, the history of that, the impacts to his personal family, Plessy v. Ferguson and Brown versus Board of Education. We kind of get an overview of what those things are and the basics of how they affect people. And tying that into actual familial history for this one person, I think is very effective, but I don't think for most people it's going to be really new information. We also do still have this aspect where the timeline is jumping a little back and forward, and I'm still not loving that, but it has become easier to stick with the flow in that. So I think that's been fine. I haven't had as much trouble since the beginning. At the midpoint, we did finally come back to the actual murder of Floyd and that scene playing out of the cops arriving and eventually things escalating and just continuing to escalate to the point where he is murdered, and the recordings of that taken by bystanders, and all of that is told in a very vivid way, but it is broken up into chunks in terms of the actual book. So you're getting little progressions of it and then flipping to something else briefly and then coming back. And I'm not sure whether that's good or not, because it really, for me, drags out the emotional impact to the reader and also keeps you from kind of coming out of it and back into the actual story that they're trying to tell, because you're constantly having to process this trauma that's happened, which I can understand the desire to do that for effect. Obviously, that's the important part, is getting across the trauma, but I would hope that anyone reading this kind of already has the emotional aspect of this in hand. So I don't know. Yeah, so I'm going to continue on reading and hopefully make it to near the end today, because I really need to get on starting another book as the month is getting away from me a bit. That is actually pretty good. The taste and consistency is like tuna. I don't know what it is. I went through the ingredients list. Either it's something processed combined or it's the konjac. I've never had that plain, so I'm not sure how different this is, but yeah, weird. It tastes like tuna. Very, very good though. I'm glad I tried this thing. I have finished His Name is George Floyd, and this one took a long time, not because I was struggling with it, but because I was a little slumpy. So that's all fine. This was actually very easy to read, very readable and propulsive. I think this was all information that I kind of already knew, and sadly, very heartbreakingly, this is really a story that I've heard before over and over and over. So it felt like a good presentation of that information though. So I do think good marks for that in terms of telling us the story of George's life and making his story known and what is so important about his story. So in terms of that presentation and why it's so familiar, we see George as a young boy and the hopes and promise of his life as that young child, and we see it sort of slowly unravel as he grows up and is increasingly criminalized, either justly or unjustly, and the forces that in his life lead him down a path of kind of wasted dreams, drug use, and being incarcerated over and over, as I said, justly or unjustly. In many cases, these are really questionable situations that are not certain he was actually a criminal in the cases. So I do think that the authors remain pretty fair and balanced on trying to portray that where we don't know the details or there isn't a lot of certainty. So I think that portrayed this really difficult story leading up to his eventual murder. What I think was the best about how this is presented is how they drew from his ancestry, multiple generations past, and kind of gave us this backstory leading up to his life that tells us all the hardships that existed in his past to put him at a disadvantage. And I think that was great, drawing from both his personal story, so as I said, his ancestry, and drawing from the history of the US, so giving us information about segregation and abolition and things surrounding sharecropping and redlining and different administrative issues that were in place to oppress Black property owners, Black sharecroppers. Things like that were drawn in really well in a narrative way rather than kind of an info dumpy method. So I thought that was handled so well. We also see, as I said, we do get to the actual murder around the middle of the book, and it is so hard to read through. I personally have not watched the video, though it is, of course, all over the internet. It's been seen by pretty much the whole world. I pretty much have avoided it as much as I could because ultimately I don't need to see that to already be aware that this is happening and the horrors of it. So seeing that in the text was very difficult. And I think not just what happened there, but past that point, we move forward into the actual case against the police officer who individually murdered him, as well as those surrounding. And we see the world, politicians, famous people, everyone seems to be pulled in by an unusual gravity that this particular case had. There's a certain gravitational pull that, for whatever reason, George Floyd rallied people around this cause even more so than others. And we do see multiple others and really their family members that are surviving surrounding this, and cases that happened while this was in progress as well. So it's all rallying around this singular case, and I have to think powerfully that we're looking at Minnesota now as a place that has really turned things around, not so much with the policing aspect. They have not made the gains that they had hoped out of the Black Lives Matter movement there in this specific case, but politically, they're doing so many things as a force for common good and the benefits of their citizens, and really making progress there in the past couple of years that I have to feel does stem from the outrage and anger and push for change from specifically the movement surrounding George Floyd's death. So I think, drawing that connection, I see so much came out of that movement, and we do see a lot of that on the page here. So the back half of this book, I think, was the most powerful for me and most gripping to read, because we are seeing all of these political figures, the political movements, and the protests rising up surrounding this having happened, and how people got swept up into that. So I think that's all the positive that I have to say about this. Unfortunately, I have a lot of negative to say about this as well, and this one is kind of going to stump me in terms of Booktube Prize and how I rate it because of that. Because as a work of nonfiction, I have really major problems with this. The minor major problem I have with this is that at the back, I'll show you better, but at the back there are notes, lots of notes and references. That's great, not a complaint about that. But the reality is that this is formatted in such a way that it's by page number, and there are no indicators of footnoting on the pages themselves through the book. And I don't mind that format for like science texts, for science nonfiction, where there are going to be multiple references every single page, and you are going to be constantly checking back and forth. But here, that's not the case. We have, jumps of 5-10 pages where there are no references to flip back for. And so then you kind of have to be wary of, well, is there anything here? Is there nothing here? Why is there nothing here? And that gets me into my bigger problem. My really big problem is that they didn't reference everything. And that's like a huge problem to me. So entire anecdotes in this book are told without indicating who that anecdote came from. And I have a massive problem with that. Not only that, but in some of these anecdotes, there are quotations. And from my perspective, that's not really something you can do. You can't just give a quote without a citation at all. And so these will be very simple stories. It's clear they're an anecdote, saying George went here and then he did this and then so-and-so said blah, 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 in quotes. And again, to me, that is completely not acceptable within nonfiction. You can say, if it's framed in a certain way, things like this person recalled saying this. But if you're talking about somebody who said this thing 30 years ago, even if you're talking to that individual, you need to make clear and apparent that this is not a recorded quotation. This is a recollection. This is a memory of someone. And so a large portion of this is taken from witness interviews or family interviews and is purely anecdotal. I don't know how much they were able to corroborate in each of these stories, whether the stories were from a single source or they got multiple sources. It sounds like multiple sources. I don't actually doubt the veracity of the information here. I just really have a problem with the transparency that they've given us about it. They do at the very end give us an author's note where they list a miles-long sequence of names that they interviewed, and they talk about how many interviews they did, but that is not transparency. That's not something that is usable. So the purpose of having these references is so if someone in the future can go, okay, this story came from John Smith, and I can go talk to him to collect information about this again. We don't have any of that for many of these stories. There are either no references at all or very generic references. At one point, there was a fairly lengthy story where it did actually say, literally, we interviewed aunts, cousins, uncles. It does not name who those aunts, cousins, uncles, etc. were. And I have a huge problem with that. I think that the fact that they interviewed a massive amount of people and did their best clearly to try and get the information explicit is great. But I think we needed a lot more transparency there. My feeling is that their approach was to try and keep themselves out of the story as much as possible by not kind of inserting into the book, we then went to interview this person. That would have been a natural way of framing to provide us this information as the reader. But I think they wanted to keep themselves out of George Floyd's story and focus his life. And I'm not certain that was the right or wrong choice, but I do think that the information could have been relayed more completely and clearly. So this is going to be a really, really difficult book to rate for those reasons. So I'm going to have to spend a lot of time thinking on it. Fortunately, I have plenty of time and I have 2 more books to read, so I will be diving into those next.
the guy has left. She's just standing in front of a mirror, looking at all the lines of worry on her face, and she's dancing by herself in front of a mirror. He's not coming back, so get out your hankies for this one.
I've deliberately avoided putting hard numbers on the scale of these differences. It is easy to find estimates and very hard to find primary sources for them after hours-long search that included a scientific paper that sourced a factoid to a book in the For Dummies series. I fell into an existential void and questioned the very nature of knowledge. Regardless, the differences are there and they're substantial. It's only a question of exactly how substantial they are. I actually laughed out loud at this. I love that we've got both references at the back and minor asides in the footnotes of Ed Young's thoughts. Very funny. I just got done putting together this chair for the office / cat room because I'm going to move the futon downstairs again. And it has to be inspected. Does it pass the quality test, Rue? So, hey, hi. I am halfway through An Immense World by Ed Yong. I am hopeful that I can finish it or make very good progress this weekend. It is a long holiday weekend in the US, so we'll see, but I'm very busy this weekend. Don't know. How Ripley's on my lap and she's moving. Sorry for the camera. So, anyway, helpful tale there. It's good. It's very good. I have no complaints. Everything I said kind of starting out is still really there. It's passion and nerding out about all of these topics, all of the ways that animals sense the world around them that's different from us. So we've been through different vision sensory things, like different colors or types of light that animals can see, feeling, hairs, that sort of thing, that the sense of touch in different ways. Heat was probably the most surprising to me so far, the ways that animals handle or react to heat very differently, or cold, I guess, temperature generally, and the way they use that as a sense, a bodily sense, rather than just their way of sort of feeling the world around them. Like, I don't know how to say that without it sounding like I'm saying the same thing. Yeah, so this has been really interesting, and I am loving that sense of passion that I talked about is so ingrained here. I keep mentally comparing it to the earlier science book that I read in the previous round, The Song of the Cell, because there the passion was present but not through the whole book. It was very momentary and focused on certain topics. Here it is saturated through the book. Even when this gets sciencey, you can still feel that sense of Ed Yong so strongly being excited by what he's talking about. So I just love that. I love that even when it does get sciencey, this is still mostly made up of anecdotes and stories of Ed either going and spending time with someone who is nerding out about the thing they love, or talking about a past story of something that has happened where it was somebody nerding out about the thing that they loved. So that really frames it in a great way, because you're constantly jumping between these personal accounts that are steeped in science and research and really detailed information, but the personal aspect that it's framed within is perfect for making it connect with the reader. So I'm loving that. So I think that's all I have to say for now, and hopefully I will make some good progress this weekend, despite, as I said, very busy this weekend. It's festival season around here, so like every weekend is going to be busy for the rest of this month, for sure. So we will see what clips I have for the remainder of this weekend, and hopefully I will check back in a day or two with some updates with this. Just got done moving things around. I removed the futon because I moved it in here in 2020 when everything was shut down and I didn't really have options to replace furniture. And I was converting this into an office from a bedroom. And so it kind of worked, but it was too big and kittens could get under it. And this is where I keep the kittens when they're fostering. So I want to get 2 chairs in here, and that's a litter box. So that can go over there. That's usually where it is, but it can go back over there once we get a second chair. But for now, just 1 chair is good, because whenever I do flooring and kitchen, I'm probably gonna need to move books or bookshelves in here. So I need some space, but I'm super happy. The new chair works and the space is okay. I may need to move stuff around. I'm not sure I like this order, if I want to switch these 2 or what, but for now, it's good. It has been all of a few minutes and Rue has already made himself at home after the horrible disruption of me moving things.
Mende is single. His room number. Hey. Okay, go wait over there. We'll pull you up in a minute. Okay. What do you guys? Hey, you guys have so many great questions. They're being impatient. And you guys, right now it's 2-2. The winner of this match will be our overall champion for this exhibition. 연습해. 쭉. 들어간다. Push. Let's go, Ella. Ella.
Big day, hopefully. I'm at the orthodontist for my checkup, and if everything has gone the way it's supposed to, I get the majority of the intrusive stuff that's in my mouth out. So the bottom should be done, and the top, I should be getting the bands and metal caries out, and then we get attachments on the top and aligners for the top, and then it should be like 6 months, hopefully, of the top, and then I'm totally done. Fingers crossed. If everything goes as planned, we shall see when I come out. Yay! There is nothing on my teeth. That is so exciting. You have no idea. So now I come back for a retainer for the top, and I got scanned for new aligners for the top and bottom. So exciting! It is that time again. I finished another book. I finished An Immense World by Ed Yong. This has an egregious problem. A very severe error that I think is quite unforgivable, actually. And that is that there's no cats in this book. I'm a little shocked, kind of. I'm obviously being somewhat jokey, but really, like, cats are like these tiny aliens that live in our homes, and they have so many fascinating behaviors, and how they perceive the world is very different, and so much unknown. And they're like not mentioned here at all. I don't know. I think mentions of his dog means that Ed Yong is a dog person a bit. It's in his bio as well. So I'm gonna assume, or I'm going to bias myself that he's a dog person while I wanted to see more cats. There is a little bit about dogs in here, but again, I think he avoided domesticated animals for the most part. The main thing of dogs is mostly smell, obviously. And I think this was a great book. All joking aside, this was a really fabulous example of sort of popular science that's really accessible and easy to read, even though it does get quite scientific. There was only really one point where I felt like, okay, we've been going down this kind of very detailed minutia of science a little too long, and it's maybe starting to lose me before, jumping to a new topic. And I thought that the sort of cohesion of topics was really well done. We get a variety of animals on each topic, on the different senses, and how they perceive the world, anything from different sort of perceptions from sight, the colors that they may see, the sort of types of light they may see, hearing, echolocation, and electrolocation. That was kind of cool and new to me. I sort of had an idea of the concept generally, but I didn't know the details or science around it. So that was very, very interesting to learn new specifics about perceptions. I also think that as far as the layout of this, the chapters were maybe a little long at times for me, but for the most part, they're quite short chapters. So I think this moves along at quite a clip, and it's easy to sort of visualize, if you will. I think that's probably the wrong way to say it, but it's hard to get across when we're talking about different means of perceiving the world. It's easy to understand what he's trying to get across because he is communicating in each chapter what is called the Umwelten or Umwelt of a particular animal, and that's their bubble of perception in the world and how they perceive the world. And it's very different from our own. So he can only communicate that using the ways that we observe that animal's perception. And so that does not quite work for me in that I really want to get weird with it. I want to hear him sort of maybe get even more speculative about what it would feel like to observe the world in these ways, or put himself in the animal's shoes a bit more. But he is being very scientific and true to the science by saying the things we can actually observe scientifically. What I love the most about this is, and I feel bad to pick on my previous book, I had a major problem with My Name is George Floyd about how it was not quite as transparent about the information. Here, the transparency is phenomenal. Every single scene of this, every anecdote, we know exactly where he is, who he's with, the conversations that they're having, or if he is recalling something from history, where that's coming from. So he is transparent the whole way through. And the kind of impeccable part to me is how much he sought out new discoveries in the past, but also in present. So he tells us sort of stories, or is there talking to a person who actually made a discovery about how an animal perceives things. And those moments of discovery are great for inciting passion in the reader, I think. And I just loved hearing that. I think that is what kept this so compulsive to read through the entirety. So it was very easy reading. It was really entertaining. It's also well formatted, as I said, and beyond everything I talked about already, there are two big sections of pictures with a little bit of text, and the text is almost like poetic. It's just a few lines on each page. It's not just straight up descriptions, but it's really lovely in how it's written and descriptive, and it flows through the section of pictures very beautifully. So I think this was a great, well-packaged book that I could hand off to just about any reader and have them enjoy. I've already booked the audiobook on hold from my library in hopes that I can get it before I have visitors at the end of this month, because this will be a great, like, everyone appropriate audiobook to listen to if it comes in, but there's still quite a long holds list, and I can see why. This was on the bestsellers list for a very long time and has done very well, because this is just a great book, and it really put me onto wanting to go back and pick up Ed Yong's previous work, because that is equally well held in the scientific and popular science communities. Kind of, it's a really, really well loved book. So I've missed out on it in the past, and I'm now kicking myself because I definitely should have read it before now. So I think that's it for Ed Yong's An Immense World for now. We'll ruminate on where I think this fits, because my rankings are getting very hard because the books have all been really good. So I've got one more book to read, and The Escape Artist? I can't remember. I need to go get the book. Hang on. Yes, it is The Escape Artist, the story of the man who broke out of Auschwitz to warn the world. So this will be my next and final book. Hopefully I can get this done in the next 2 weeks and get in my votes.
With one hand, I clung to the rope. With the other, I clung to Maisie. Again, and do you also believe that I am so very, very wicked? Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous. I have to say, that is highly unusual. The effect said, you have taken a course of understanding, not my story, for I've never been so foolish to tell a man the truth. Might I ask why you wish to go by my name?
I have read the first couple chapters of The Escape Artist by Jonathan Freedland, and so far it's fine. It's not standing out too much. We kind of opened with an escape, and we find out that the escapee that this is focused on, Rudolph, previously went by a different name, Walter, and he had multiple escape attempts or escapes. I'm not sure yet, because we got this kind of escape and then jumped back to the lead up to his being taken away into a prison camp. So far, I do think it's very much just presenting the information, though. I'm not noticing a lot from the author here. So I have a lot more to read, so we will see how that continues on once things are further developing as he gets into the camps and we're seeing what develops into this escape attempt and how he gets out. Oh my goodness, this cat. What are you doing? Hi. Look at those ears. We unfortunately had to do a flea bath, and he looks like a tiny gremlin for the look like. I got about 100 pages into The Escape Artist, so making good headway, about a third of the way through. I'm not sure how I'm feeling about it, because it is very much just kind of laying out, and then he did this, and then they went here, and then, sorry, Rue is getting on my lap, and then, you know, here's what he thought about that sort of thing. So it doesn't really feel like the author is doing a ton more than just giving us the information. So that's both good and bad, I feel like. I do feel like the facts are doing the heavy lifting here, and the author isn't really doing much to portray it. So I do think in terms of this story, like, the facts do kind of stand on their own, and that's important to let the facts speak for themselves. But you also do kind of want the author to have actually had a role. And so far the role that I'm getting from him I'm not loving, because he seems to like to leave us on a cliffhanger, kind of. He gives us a little flourish at the end, and I'm not really in love with that. So I don't know, I need to push forward and make some more headway this week, if I can stop being distracted by adorable kittens. Hi. What's going on? So I think brief nighttime update on The Escape Artist. Good progress for once. I've been so fits and starts in this whole vlog, but I'm about 50 pages from finishing. I will finish this weekend and easily be done with a couple weeks left in the month to get this done for Booktube Prize. I feel like the title of this, The Escape Artist, is what differentiates this from the mass of World War II books. However, that escape, we started with it in the opening scene, but it has taken over 160 pages to get back to that opening scene. And in those 160 pages, we really are getting the story that I would hope everyone already knows. It's not new details, not new information for me. And that's not bad necessarily, but I think it could have been compressed, certainly. And already this is not padded whatsoever. This whole book is not. So I think we didn't need a lot of that information in order to deliver what is the standout story here of the escape, of what happened after, of how the world reacted once the information from inside Auschwitz came out. And that part has been very jarring and new, fresh information to me. So I wish that I'm already seeing the end of the book and feeling like we just got started, really. So for me, reading these accounts of, so Walter Rosenberg, it's a little confusing, is the original name of Rudolf Verba. So he's referenced most of the time as Walter Rosenberg. So he and another man escaped together, and they shared their stories, and that became the Auschwitz report that starts getting very covertly handed around to people who might have power to say something or do something. Rather than just making it public or spreading it wide, it's passed out in very small numbers, which is odd on its own. But those people that it goes to make strange choices about how to deal with it. The first handful, I was so frustrated because immediately they go to kind of religious leaders first. And to me, that's obviously not going to work. The ones who do have power kind of have very local power and can't really do anything to change that much, even if they did, but because they're religious leaders, religion as a whole, a large part of it is keeping order and hierarchy. And so in many of those cases, they did what I fully expected and didn't really do anything, or expected someone higher up than them to make the decision that they should upset things. And most horrifying is that they didn't sort of publicize this information specifically so that the Jews wouldn't panic, which is just a horrifying statement to make in general. They should have panicked. Like, they should have wanted them to resist, to have foreknowledge. And so many people kept things under wraps, specifically to prevent any level of panic or upset in norms socially. And so things are rolling forward, and I think hope is starting to occur now where I'm at. So I don't know how things are going to develop in those 50 remaining pages. But one thing that I am increasingly frustrated with as we are kind of building outside of Auschwitz, this person, Walter, now as Rudy, living kind of in a secret identity, is building a life for himself and is having real problems with how little is being done about the information that he got out. But the author, it feels, is leaning on him as uniquely heroic in some way. And he's just like a 18 or 19-year-old kid at this point who did have a desperate dream of getting out and succeeded at that. And that's what makes him unique, is that he succeeded. But that wasn't through any sort of special skills he had or anything unique about him as an individual. He was not a hero in that aspect. There were so many others, including the person who got out with him, who is not talked up as this individual hero. There were so many others, even who we're told about, who attempted and just failed and didn't survive. And they were equally as skilled, equally as knowledgeable as these two that we see did succeed. They just got lucky, really. They had everything work out, even despite some really close calls. And yet the author really likes to dramatize this and work that up a little bit more than I think is really fitting. And I can kind of see, like it mentions in the author's bio, that he also writes thrillers under a pseudonym. So maybe that tone is coming in. He is trying to grip the reader. But I don't see the need for that. Again, and I think I was talking about something earlier in one of my older clips about feeling like the author is kind of leaning into dramatizing things a lot. And I don't think this needs it. It really doesn't. It is such a strong story on its own. And where I want to see the author do something with this, yes, but what he is doing is kind of odd choices to me. So that was not a very short update, but that's where I'm at. I think I probably will finish the last 50 pages tomorrow. Then I will be done and free of Booktube Prize. I keep saying that like it's some, shackles around my neck or something. It's not. I do really love doing the Booktube Prize. It's just I hate having assigned reading for quite as much as it is. It's like 1 or 2 books more than I would prefer, but I always love reading Booktube Prize because it's been so fun. Every round that I've participated in, I read new things. I try things that I definitely wouldn't have tried otherwise, whether I like them or not. And it has really varied selections. Every single round I've been in has been just wildly different sorts of books. So I'm not complaining about Booktube Prize reading at all when I'm saying I'm excited to be free of it. It's not a complaint. It's just that I like having that deadline done. So I will check in, I'm sure, tomorrow. Why do you need to drink my empty water cup? It's not good. Nope, no chewing the library book. Hey, no fighting. No fight it. No. Hey, don't do it. It's so hard to get anything done with kittens around. Well, we did it. Finished Booktube Prize 2023 reading with The Escape Artist. Thank goodness. Plenty of time remaining, so I'm going to be processing my overall thoughts. So let's just talk about the last little bit that I read since last time I checked in. So I think I had 50 pages or so to read last I checked in. And unfortunately, that last 50 pages was really all downhill for me. After spending the entirety of the book up till then focused in the year 1944, suddenly we're going at breakneck speed through the entire rest of his life after he gets out, really. So it feels very summary, very abbreviated of his life. And he comes out as not a particularly likable individual. I think for me, if you've read Mouse by Art Spiegelman, that has a similar element to it, I would say, in that story. It's a graphic nonfiction work. Art is interviewing his father, who survived concentration camp and came out, and their relationship is very strained because of these quirks of his personality. And as Art is going through this, he's not just telling the story of his father's experiences in concentration camp and kind of the rise of the Nazi regime. He is also including the aspects of him at that present time interviewing his father and like them seeing each other. And their strained relationship plays out on the page, and over the course of his talking to his dad through this story, he is learning the fact that his father's quirks and the things that he finds abrasive are things that resulted from that experience, or even things that allowed him to survive. And we get that same sense here, where at times the author speculates that these qualities are things that allowed him to survive, or even his wife, Verba's wife, and later ex-wife, found a lot of problems with their relationship because of how he behaved, because of paranoia. Was the paranoia something that pre-existed that allowed him to make it through the experience, or was it something that just came out of this aspect of being beset by everyone in power? And so I think that's an important question, but it wasn't really given the weight or time, I think, on the page to think about what that meant for him. And so I don't know that I love that. And again, he doesn't come off particularly likable as a person, and I think where he was heroized earlier in the story, we see the faults that maybe he wasn't as heroic as the author is trying to lead us to accept, I guess. At a point, he is unhappy because of the slowness to respond, and he basically gets involved in vigilantism and is a little bit extreme even for the people that he's fallen in with in that, because he seems to want to go in guns blazing rather than strategically about things. And I can understand that coming out of the story and his sense of helplessness to get action and to save lives. But it still comes off as a reckless teenager or young man rather than someone that is really thinking through helping people. So the motives definitely come across more questionable, I think, than what the author is giving us. Or not even motives. Motive is not the right word. His motive was definitely correct, but he very much comes off thinking he's invincible and like he can do whatever he wants. And I don't think that's necessarily something to heroize. We also see a lot more of the author's voice in this final 50 pages, and I had mentioned I really didn't like that earlier on when it was kind of coming through. And yeah, it very strongly leans toward dramatization, making this sound, making him sound more singular as an individual rather than looking at the bigger picture and all the other people that were going through the same thing or were trying to escape just like he did. And yeah, at moments, the author is focusing in on Verba as a singular person when he escaped with somebody else. And occasionally we'll get these mentions of either his partner who he escaped with or another duo who escaped shortly after. And yet the self-awareness is not really made clear about the fact that they all kind of went through the same thing and the fact that they all were equally responsible for getting messages out about this. What is really heartbreaking about the whole thing here is just how the lack of the response from anyone who got information. And later in Verba's life, we do hear about some people facing consequences for that. And it just seems like Verba so much held on to bitterness and didn't as much want justice as vengeance. And that's, again, very hard to read about from this perspective where, again, we're being sold this hero story, and I just don't know how heroic that is. It seems to clash with the narrative the author is trying to portray. The sour note for me that we ended on is that, in conclusion, the author could have taken us through the facts of the mass of people who were saved by Verba. And instead, he makes an appeal to emotion that kind of overinflates the claim, to me anyway, by spending 2 paragraphs talking through the families and descendants of these people. And talking through how Verba saved all these, masses of people. No, he did save a huge amount of people, but he didn't save the people you're talking about. The people you're talking about did not exist. It is sufficient to just focus on the actual people he saved, instead of misrepresenting this statement and trying to overblow this information. Like, it just frustrated me so much to end on that note, and I really hate when people do that, when people act as if the children are somehow an extension of their parents. They're other separate individuals, and if they did not exist, they were not saved by Verba's actions. No. So, does this stand up to the other works? That is going to be a lot to think about. I do think that this book was a solid execution of delivering the information that we received through it. Do I think that it was what the author intended? Do I think that it does hold up to the other books, or imparts something in a way that is new and fresh? I'm going to have to think a lot about that and work out my rankings. So I will come back and discuss my rankings at some point later on. You'll see shortly. I just got back from the optometrist picking up some new glasses. Really like them. You can see they're sort of green with clear underneath. I'm loving them, but I am still very much adjusting. I very much thought I was totally done providing individual book updates for The Escape Artist, but I have since, in the week after, I guess, gone back and actually read the Kindle sample of Rudolf Verba's own memoir, I Escaped from Auschwitz, because I had noticed early in this book, The Escape Artist, there are a huge number of references to that. So I just wanted to see, is it telling the same story I expect it is, and how different is it, what does the writing look like, that sort of thing. So I wanted to get a feeling for how this author adapted the individual's own work on the topic. And it didn't really help my feelings about The Escape Artist, unfortunately. It certainly pulls from that work, and unfortunately I'm now concerned about how much it pulled without citing, perhaps, because I immediately, as soon as I started reading the sample, started noticing things that I could recall from the beginning of this book. And so I'm going to give you just a couple of examples. This first one is not cited or referenced at all. There are a couple of citations on this page. None of them are to I Escaped, and none of them are in line with this sentence. Jews were to be stripped of their citizenship, dispatched across the border to Poland to live in what Walter and the others imagined were reservations, like those fenced-in lands that they had heard about in America set aside for Indians. Versus, I simply would not stomach the suggestion that I was no longer a member of the community, and that therefore I would have to be cordoned off, like a North American Indian. The only difference between us, indeed, was that the Indian was left in his own country. So that's example 1, no reference. Example 2 is referenced correctly to I Escaped. The second example definitely is referenced. It's referenced a bit late, I would say, considering the text here starts on the previous end of chapter in An Escape Artist and continues on. He looked down and ripped the yellow star from his coat. Next chapter. On that night, in March 1942, the future consisted only of the empty darkness that stood between him and the frontier separating Slovakia from Hungary. After half an hour, the taxi driver had dropped him off. It was not safe to get any closer. Walter would do the rest on foot. He checked his pockets, a map and compass, a box of matches, and some money, 200 crowns, given to him by the mother he had left behind. And in his own words, I did not look back as the taxi drove away. Not because I was choked with emotion, but because I was too busy ripping the yellow Star of David from my shoulder. Then I lay back in the worn leather seats, my stomach twitching with excitement. In my pocket, I had my mother's 200 crowns, a map, and a box of matches. It was not much for the journey I was facing, but I was only a boy of 17 and had yet to learn to calculate the risks. So, for me, the life is taken out of those passages, certainly, I feel much more voice to the passages in Verba's own words, and certainly it's his own account, so I'm always going to prefer reading the text of the person who lived it. So yeah, unfortunately that has made decision making about this much harder, because obviously I know that this author has drawn from Verba's own accounts, but I'm now considering how much did he pull directly from the information that Verba already provided, and do I really recommend this book versus telling people to go read Verba's actual account?